Well, with us now is Lindsay Nicholson, the editorial director of Good Housekeeping magazine, who wrote a memoir, Loving on the Seabed, a memoir of love, life and survival after her first husband and eldest daughter both died of leukemia. Also joining us is the publisher, Gail Rebuck, whose husband, Philip Gould, one of the architects of New Labour, died of cancer in 2011. Thank you so much to both of you for coming in. Gail, firstly to you, you know Sheryl Sandberg. In fact, I believe you published her book. What did you feel when you read what she wrote?
I thought it was so typical of Sheryl, who had somehow managed through the book Lean In to speak to many generations of women through the prism of her own personal experience, you know, coupled with research, and really change the minds of a generation and define the challenges of being a working mother. And when I read her post, I just felt, my goodness me, she's done it again. She has both exposed herself and taught us all something very important. And I think the third thing is asked a number of really important questions and put us on the spot about how we talk, or more to the point, don't talk about death.
It was almost impossible, though, to read through just a couple of pages without tears coming to the eyes. I mean, did you find it, while intelligent and full of suggestions about how to live our lives and how to communicate, did you feel moved by it in that sense?
Utterly moved by it. I mean, she just showed her raw grief and her vulnerability in a way that was so compelling. I found it, yes, I was in tears. I mean, it reminded me of the death of my own husband and what I went through, and I think she's done something absolutely magnificent.
Lindsay, why do you think this has struck such a chord? I mean, this has been sort of thousands of people sharing this every minute on the internet. I mean, it really has touched many people.
I felt when I read it that she really captured a lot of what I felt. I think she's really managed to put her finger on what a lot of the feelings are. One of the things that I also think is very important about what she's done is the timing of it. So she chose to do it 30 days after he died, which in the Jewish tradition is an important point when you move on. And of course these things are traditions because, you know, that it's in keeping with how we start to grieve. So so I think she chose a moment that, whether we're in the Jewish faith or not, we actually feel is an important point. It is the start of the next bit of the journey. Of course, it's a journey that goes on for an extremely long time. But it's not often you hear people articulate that in this day and age. And I think that's really something that spoke to people as well.
And one of the things, Gail, as you were alluding to, is she talks about other people just simply not knowing how to react.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was pregnant when my husband died, and you know, that was a very difficult thing for people to deal with. And I went, after about 6 weeks, I went to a party, and pregnant woman enters a party, pregnant widow enters a party is a guaranteed way of clearing a room. I mean, people were literally huddled down the other end of the room for fear of what to say to me. It was very isolating.
Why do you think that happened?
I think you see, we can, in this day and age, you can get to midlife without, if you're lucky, without knowing anyone that's died. For a lot of people, their first experience of death is the death of their own parents when they're in midlife. We've lost a lot of the language around it. We've lost a lot of the custom, the practice. Which is why I thought it was so interesting that Sheryl had reached back into a tradition, and that's what people are really responding to.
Gail, did you find that isolation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I completely agree with what Lindsay said. The ritual around death, you begin to experience it, I mean, from day one, but as time goes on and it becomes tougher and tougher to know what the next wave of emotion might be, you really do begin to rely on ritual. And I think that was what was so moving, because of course even before the first 30 days in the Jewish religion you have 7 days of Shiva, which, you know, means that the whole family, people come round and you are surrounded by people for that first sort of awful you know, few days of total shock and disorientation, followed then by the ghastly process, because when someone dies, you're not left alone because you have all the administration around death, which is, you know, crushing at your most vulnerable moment. So I think the importance of ritual is there, but I absolutely agree. I mean, I think before my husband died, I didn't know how to speak to people who suffered a bereavement. It's very, very difficult. And I certainly know now what not to do. And I think Cheryl mentions some of the things that you shouldn't do, like ask someone who's just lost their husband, how are you? Because it's pretty obvious they're not very good and they're feeling pretty terrible. But she says in her incredibly practical way, just say, how are you today? Which acknowledges that you take it, and you really do take it, one day at a time.
How did people relate to you?
Well, I sensed, I mean, it wasn't as extreme clearly as Lindsay. I wasn't pregnant at the time, and of course I was much older when my husband died. But nonetheless, people, even some of my closest friends, didn't quite know how to relate to me. But I'm afraid when you've suffered a bereavement, you join a club that no one really wants to be a member of. And actually, you find yourself gravitating towards other people who've lost, in my case, a life partner, because actually they're the only people that really understand. And they're the conversations that you can really have with no barriers and feel a kind of deep, deep empathy that actually, for at least a nanosecond, makes you feel better.
I think it's also really nice if friends tell you their other news as well. I mean, one of the things I found was that people perhaps don't want to tell you their good news, the person they've started seeing how well their child is doing or something like that, because they think it's unfair. But if you don't hear any of the good news that's going on in the rest of the world, then you feel even more isolated. It's terribly isolating because you have, of course, lost the love of your life, your partner, the person that you imagine doing everything with, and so you feel terribly alone. So just bits of news from the world
and
can
also
help.
The importance of work, because we're both working women, and Cheryl talks about the importance of going back to work. And I certainly found, I mean, I worked right the way through my husband's illness, and apart from a few weeks after he died when I was so shell-shocked I couldn't do anything, I then went back to work, and people would say to me, oh, Gail, what are you doing here? Why don't you take 3 months off? As if, you know, that was a wonderful balm, the idea of being on my own for 3 months, you know, grieving. I mean, actually work was fantastic because as a working woman, you're very used to compartmentalising your life. So I could go back to work and I could be professional, although people at work, as Cheryl said as well, you know, find it difficult to know just at the beginning how to relate to you. But as long as you relax them and say, it's okay, we can talk about it, it's fine, then you slip into at least, you know, hours of normality.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think work is a saviour.
Thank you both so much for coming in tonight and being so open and candid about your own experiences. We really appreciate it. Thank you.